Warning, the following podcast may contain traces of love.
The Gaming Lovers Podcast with Brendo and Jem.
Is that for an introduction? Welcome everybody to another romantic episode of The Gaming Lovers.
Have we done romantic episodes in the past? I'm trying to think.
Oh, for me they're all romantic. They all mean something special to me, each and every one of them. Yes, it's no secret that we are lovers. It is the Gaming Lovers, and we're going to talk about games that feature lovers, I guess. I was trying to get a theme going there, but it made sense. Just sounded a bit worse than I meant it to.
G'day, I'm Jem.
I'm Brendo.
And we're the Gaming Lovers. Welcome to episode 43 of the Gaming Lovers Podcast.
It's getting cuddly and romantic this time of year because it is Valentine's Day.
Lubbu Lubbu.
Lubbu Lubbu des, something Jem and I say to each other quite often, which in Japanese, if you think that it's love, well, that's one thing. But then you'll be asked by people, Lubbu Lubbu desu ka? Which means, is it love? Is it real love? Lubbu Lubbu des.
I mean love. It translates to, it's a very girly term that apparently is seen in a lot of love letters, I think, from teenage girls when they're confessing. And it's one thing now that I know what it is. I see it a lot in animes and I can recognize when that text or the phrase comes up, which is kind of amusing. So we say it a lot and it makes us giggle.
Another one of our dorky little habits.
Yes.
There have been great couples in gaming history and quite a few games that yourself and myself have played where you get to actually choose your romantic interest in the game. We're going to be talking about who is the greatest and most enjoyable romance options that we've experienced outside of our monogamous marriage. I guess that is what I'm trying to get at here.
There's a couple of conditions, though, because if we were including things like dating sims, that would take up pretty much the bulk of this list because that's all the game is. But we wanted to look at games, like general games, that include a romance arc to it, not just specifically all there is to this game is romance.
Yes.
So, sorry, hun, but no hatful boyfriend for you.
No, there'll have to be pigeon romancing another episode, unfortunately.
Also, to clarify, the games that we'll be featuring things like games that will give you the option to get married but don't really actually give you details on the relationships. Things like Fable, I think.
Oh, Fable
that don't really build a relationship. It's just, oh, I'm married now and, oh, I've spent too far long away and they hate me. Whoops. Things like that aren't going to be included on this list.
I'm glad you mentioned Fable because that's probably one of the pinnacles of worst romance aspects of gameplay ever.
And third, relationships that are just kind of fling options. So games like Saints Row 4, where it's kind of making fun of games like Mass Effect, where you can just randomly hook up, but nothing is really substantial long-term or a decent story at least as far as romances go aren't included either. So feel free to fight us on this list, but like these are things that have found to be really satisfying story-wise, and we wanted to go through that this episode of The Gaming Lovers.
Well, you've said fight us on that if you want, but hey, I'm a lover, not a fighter. Before we get too deep into these relationships, we're going to be talking about our 4 in Feb update of our gaming goals.
How you doing?
I've beaten nothing.
Natty!
I have started with 2 of my larger games at the same time, so it's not a surprise that we're 10 days into the month, 11, 12, I don't know. I can't even keep track of February at this rate. It's been a busy couple of weeks, which has not helped, but I am charging along at Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. I pledged last episode to be done with 2 characters' campaigns. I haven't done that. I've done 1, and I'm about halfway through the second. So I'm a little bit behind where I projected. I have completed Terra, not like Ra Terra, but more like Earth Terra. I've completed Terra's campaign, which was very interesting because he's sort of cast as the bad guy out of the 3 heroes that you play as. He sort of ends up in situations where he doesn't quite know what to do, a bit Anakin Skywalker-ish. He's being led by the
Being
wrong
manipulated.
people. Mm-hmm. Yes. I felt sorry for the poor sucker because he just wants to control the darkness within him. He wants to move on and be a good man, and things just don't really work out that way as he continues through these wonderful fairy tale lands of Snow White and Peter Pan and fun places like that where the true darkness comes out.
It's so funny watching him interact with the Disney princesses because it just seems so... He feels like he's so out of place. Yeah. But part of me is like going, man... It would be funny to see like them completely warp the storylines of like him impacting these worlds to the point where they don't end up meeting like their princes because he shows up.
Now, I have also started to get about halfway through Ventus's storyline. Sorry, people call him Ven, not Ventus. Mm-hmm. I'm very curious. The beautiful thing about a game that gives you 3 characters that all their campaigns sort of criss and cross at different points is you only get 1/3 of the story in each campaign, which raises more questions to be answered later on. I love that in any sort of narrative where the more you watch the first half of something, you're just like, none of this makes sense to me. I have no idea what's happening. But then the other parts fill in the blanks and suddenly it's like, oh, it all makes sense. I always love that. So I have so many questions about Ventus because he looks exactly like Roxas, who is a key character earlier in the series, depending on if you want to go timeline or entry-wise. Mm-hmm. So I got lots of questions, and I enjoy his gameplay a little more. He's quicker than Terra was. Terra's much more powerhouse-based. Ven is a lot faster, which is nice when you want to move around a bit. Mm-hmm. And although you're revisiting the same worlds, you're at different areas in the world. And in Cinderella's world's case, you're actually the size of a mouse, which has put a whole new perspective on things. Wonderful.
Stay away from Lucifer.
And a fun fact, I've discovered that both Sleeping Beauty, Aurora, and Cinderella, both voiced by the same actress, so I think they're just the same person. Jennifer Hale. You may be 2 people, or maybe they're just 2 sides of the same coin.
Jennifer Hale has been voicing Cinderella for a long time, even in Wreck-It Ralph 2, that Ralph breaks the internet.
Well, let's just say this is not the last time you're going to hear Jennifer Hale's name on this episode because, boy, if we're talking video game romances without sounding creepy... I love you, Jennifer.
Okay.
Also, I have been playing Pokemon Moon. I've mentioned before I've started it in the past and sort of lost interest partway through. I am past that point, so I'm in uncharted territory. Not the last time you heard the word uncharted on this episode either. Pokemon Moon I'm having a lot of fun with, and I'll give a more in-depth review of that next episode because, like I said, I've retraced my steps, so all that I've experienced so far has sort of been bland, and I'm like, I've seen this before, I just want to get through it. I've seen this before, I just want to get through it. Move on. And now I'm in new stuff, so I'll be able to give a fresh opinion of the Pokemon Moon experience when I play just a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And that's my 4 in Feb update. 2 games, 0 complete so far. How have you been travelling on this wonderful journey we have?
A lot better than you. But I use different strategy when it comes to 4 in Feb than you do. You always go the big games first. I like to get some of the smaller stuff out of the way so I feel like, yeah, I've made progress. So I've finished Kirby Star Allies, which I was close to finishing last episode.
Yes.
I am partway through God of War. I'm officially in Alfheim, so I've done that first little section as much as it would let me. And I have managed to bring back the light to the temple. That's all I'll say. I figure that's not too spoilerish.
No, that's fine.
And I have also completed another story arc in Period Cube.
Well, you have been productive.
I didn't tell you about that one. I wanted to get some surprise out of you.
Well, first things first, you finished Kirby Star Allies.
Yes.
How did you find that experience? Was it as easy as you were bragging about last episode?
The levels were, there was one boss fight that was frustrating. And it's funny, it wasn't like the main boss, because that was very easy to kind of to predict when they were going to come down for a big strike and stuff and time my attacks. Mm-hmm. But there was one fight which was like 3 waves in a row, and I couldn't heal in between.
Yep.
And that was what kept getting me, because with the AI, this is the one time that the AIs were hindering me. They were just following me around, and if I wasn't attacking, if I was just on the defense running away, then they weren't attacking either. So
what sort of useless star allies are you?
it was very frustrating. It took a while to kind of get past that point. Once I did, it was okay. But that was one of the few times I'm like, okay, this stupid game. And thank goodness I had a lot of lives stored up from running through it so easily. So, yeah, it was a bit frustrating, but nothing too bad. Like, just enough to annoy me.
You've just triggered a memory from my archives about Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep as well. JRPGs are so guilty of this, of having consecutive boss fights in a row without a break, without a save point. I faced that at the end of Terra's campaign. 3 quite tough bosses. I was playing on normal difficulty, so I figured I would be fine to just sort of cruise my way through the game. I wasn't spending time power leveling or grinding to unlock super abilities or anything like that. But I somehow bluffed my way past the first boss. I barely survived by the skin of my teeth on the second, and then I hit my head against that third boss like probably 8 times. And I did not want to quit because I'd already gotten past 2 fights I wasn't confident that I could do again straight away. And so I was stuck in that limbo of, I want to go to bed, but I don't want to turn the console off because I'll lose my progress on those other 2 bosses, but I can't beat this one.
So if the third boss did beat you...
I could just start the third again.
Oh, see, I didn't have that option.
Yeah.
I got to that third wave, and if you die, which happened a lot, it made you go back to the start, and I had to go through that section again and go through those waves. I'm like, I hate this. So annoying.
We both had boss issues this week, but I just wanted to get that off my chest. Give us at least a save point in between, please.
I know, or an ability that, I love being able to heal mid-battle, and I hate it when I'm denied that option. It's so annoying.
Now,
Anyways.
God of War. How are you enjoying that? A little bit out of your wheelhouse as far as combat and such, or
it's not too bad.
Finding it okay?
It's interesting because it's got like a lot of just mash this button to attack light or heavy, but then it does have combos that you can unlock as you level up certain skills and things. So trying to remember what to press for those, I keep leveling things up and then I never use them because I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just keep mashing this. I'm very good at mashing, as you know. But yeah, it's a beautiful game, and I feel like I've only really scratched the surface. I don't know if I've gotten very far into it. I've only just gotten past that first hurdle in Alfheim, so I tell you what, though, I really want to give Atreus a hug.
I knew you would.
I'm like, this kid, and I keep seeing Kratos going to, like, put a hand on his shoulder, and I'm like, do it, he needs it, do it, show him some affection, come on. So I will probably pop really loudly with, like, yeah, when he finally mans up and does that.
Do you want to give Kratos a hug?
He'd probably crush me.
I think he could use a hug.
They both could. It's sad. They're just they seem so lonely. They're in their like bubbles of pain, and they could be there for each other, but they're both sucky at communicating correctly. I mean, Atreus is far more open about how he feels, and you can see he's on that verge of, I don't know how old he is exactly, but he looks like he's about to hit like teenage years. It looks like he's about 11 or 12. I could be wrong. So he's kind of got that snarkiness creeping in now of like he wants to show that he loves his dad, but at the same time he's like, I can do things and I don't need you.
Yeah, I'm independent.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what to do. I know what to do.
Exactly. Like, oh, what a fun age.
I'm not a kid. I'm not a kid.
It's funny, like when you're growing up and stuff, you're like, yeah, I can be trustworthy. I can make decisions on my own. As you get older, you're like, anyone that's like a couple of years younger than you is a child.
Absolutely. As a child, you're like, these adults don't know what they're talking about. Then as an adult, they're like, you kids are so stupid.
In that same vein, like going back and watching Disney movies, The Little Mermaid is always the kicker for me when she's like, I'm 16 years old, I'm not a child. And I'm like, yes, you are. Shut up and go to bed.
Get in your clam.
Oh, man. So anyway,
And
I'm enjoying it.
that's great to hear because I gushed to no end of how much I loved God of War when I played it early in this podcast.
The first episode of the podcast,
Live?
you reviewed it.
Indeed.
So if anyone, I don't know if most people tend to start from number one, but if you haven't and you would like to hear Brendo's thoughts on the game, jump back to the very beginning of the Gaming Lovers podcast.
Just don't tease us about how awkward we sound. It was like it's like we were a 12-year-old growing through the awkwardness.
You can hear us hopefully get better at this. Hopefully.
And finally, Period Cube. Obviously, it's going to make the tippy top of our romance list, surely.
Well, that's one of those things I'm not including because the whole purpose of those games is they're pretty much dating simulators. The visual novels like that. Not all, but most. That's what they target towards. So I'm not including it.
Just a quick recap for those who have not paid attention to Period Cube, like myself. What's the basic plot line of that game?
Your character, you can always name your character, so I never like to say the name that they give them because I'm like, I always change it. So your brother has disappeared and you go to his university to go surprise him, but he's missing. And you get sucked basically into this digital video game world. It's very Sword Art Online, but more convoluted and less well explained. But I think that's part of the point is that you get pieces of the puzzle for each person, like each romance arc that you follow, you get given more information and then it starts to make a little more sense. I still haven't got all the answers yet, which is driving me bonkers. But as you choose different paths and you can choose your class type as well. So you actually have attacks in a visual novel, which is really strange. Like sometimes you'll have enemies and you go, do you fire your bow and arrow? Do you use magic? Do you run away? This kind of stuff. And so depending on your choices will depend on what path you take in the story. And basically you're trying to find out what your brother has done. Is your brother actually a good guy or a bad guy? It's all a bit up in the air depending on who you run into. You keep hearing conflicting stories from people that are also trapped in this digital world with you. So, yeah.
It's an interesting concept.
I don't want to go into more detail in case anyone wants to play it. I don't want to give away spoilers.
No, that's fine.
The few that I have.
I just wanted the basic premise.
Yeah. So it's an intriguing thing. It's not always the best executed as far as storytelling. I mean, I might change my mind by the time I actually get to the true ending, and I might be like, "This is amazing," and I take back everything I said. So I don't know. I'll let you know once I finally finish it in 4 and Feb.
Well, we'll see what sort of lofty goals we set for ourselves at the end of this episode as far as our ambitions of how far or how many games we intend on beating in a week. We will have to wait and see.
We will.
But coming up after this, a look at the romance options, angles, storylines, couples, characters in the great realm of video gaming.
Share the love. Follow us on Twitter at Brendo and Jem. That's BRENDOJEM.
Love's in the air. Everywhere I look around.
It's true. It's in the air. It's 90-something% nitrogen, 12%. No, those maths don't check out. Never mind. It doesn't matter which media you enjoy. Video games, movies, TV shows.
Books.
They've all got their great romantic couples. The great iconic couples.
Iconic? Sorry.
Of all time.
We have gone through like almost every game and try and go, is this one got like a good romance plot subplot? Is it worth mentioning? And there was a bit of debate between us as to what should be included and what's not. So we're going to go through quite a few different games and the famous couples and stories throughout. We're trying to remain as spoiler-free as possible. So just a little bit of an asterisk. So there may be some slight spoilers ahead. So if that really isn't your thing, then we apologise.
It should be fine.
Yeah.
I don't like to spoil myself on anything, and I don't like to spoil other people, so I will rein you in if you start wandering too far in that direction. Some of these games are linear, and they just have great character development of two characters in particular.
Yeah.
Sometimes more than that,
Yep.
and that's what starts the fireworks. But other ones are just open-ended games with options, and we're going to discuss what we chose or who's the best. And no doubt
that's where we will start fighting.
But of course, they say that your first time is special, and I'm pretty sure both of our first romance options in video games were actually from the same game, but many years apart. Now, we would have played things like The Sims, where you can enjoy a little woohoo, as it's called. But apart from that, when it comes to actual video games, I fell in love with a certain video game character in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic.
Bastila would have been your first video game girlfriend?
Pretty much, yes. And
Jennifer Hale.
Yes, hello. Hi, Jennifer.
Oh, my word.
Now, I enjoyed picking the dialogue options that were pseudo-flirty with Bastila. She's a straight-laced Jedi knight, and she wants to do things by the book. She wants you to behave yourself and to fall in line, and we have a mission to do. Can we stay focused, please? And the most fun is just to push her buttons and watch her get more and more flustered. And as things go on, maybe that tough exterior sort of starts to crack and she starts to actually enjoy the banter. And, I mean, that was fantastic. Excellent voice acting, as we said. Jennifer Hale always does a top job. And through the branching dialogue options, the performance, the ebbs and flows of the actual storyline, where Bastila is probably the key NPC in that tale, I greatly enjoyed playing Knights of the Republic and romancing Bastila. And yourself?
For me, Carthonasi, who was voiced by Raphael Savage, and he also makes an appearance in another game on this list. We'll get there. He was just so sweet. He's a little softer than Bastila. At first, he doesn't trust you because you escape at the very beginning. This isn't spoilers because it's like opening scene.
Yeah, the first 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah, you're on a ship and you got to get to the escape pods and you make it off with Karth, and that happens regardless of what gender you play as. And he does not trust you at first. He thinks that you could be the reason that everything went badly, and so he starts firing and interrogating you basically once you've gotten to safety.
And he's happy to interrogate you, but as soon as you ask him anything, his shields are up and he does not want to answer any of your questions.
Yes.
He's very guarded early on.
He's guarded, but he's also very sweet and I think warms to you much faster than Bastila does. So he becomes your friend and is a little more sarcastic, I think, than Bastila. For me, I was like, he's fun, and I think, like, regardless of where we were, because KOTOR is one of the few games that will let you have conversations even if you're in the middle of battle. You can be in a fight and you go over and talk to someone and be like, hey, I want to chat. and it would let you, which is always really funny. Things will be exploding behind you and you're almost, like, invincible because you're having a conversation.
Yeah, just hang on, battle droids. We're having it deep and meaningful here. Hold the blaster fire.
I need to confess my love. Just everyone stop fighting. So anyway, he's a lot of fun and he's very much light side. That doesn't mean, though, that these romances, you can't sway them with your charisma depending on which route you want to take with the game. So that's always a really fun element as well. Because it's an early BioWare game, they always had very limited romance options. It was either one or the other. It wasn't as diverse as it is now.
There was actually a third romance option in that game, but it was incredibly hard to trigger. It was very specific. You had to play as a female and you could romance, or you could get Juhani to confess her love for you. But it's incredibly difficult to actually trigger. Typical early BioWare buggy scripting.
Well, there's a lot of romance games that have very specific flags, and if you miss one, then options out. So, gotta make sure you get those romance flags up and flying.
Oh, that sounds interesting. Moving on to the sequel, which we both as well played, as well.
Sith Lords.
The Sith Lords. Now, this was not technically done by BioWare.
No,
This
it
was
wasn't.
handballed across to Obsidian Entertainment, but they did enhance many aspects of the game.
Yep.
It's just a shame it was missing a few key pieces.
Like the ending.
That was an important
Yeah.
oversight.
Thankfully, some modders out there went and dug up bits and pieces that were in there but weren't fully coded. So there was a lot of dialogue that was recorded and left in there but never, I guess, finished. So they've managed to unearth it. I don't know how. Like, I'm in my head, I'm picturing like digital archaeologists unearthing all this stuff that wasn't used and then piecing it together.
Plate of code. We must restore this immediately.
Yes, be careful. So they've managed to, on Steam, release a modified version that has fixed a lot of those holes, which I'm so thankful for. Thank you, guys. I don't know which I prefer as far as romance options go, if it's Karth or Atten in the Sith Lords, because Atten is pretty great.
Atten's like almost the polar opposite of Karth Onasi. Karth's guarded with a little bit of sweetness thrown in there. Atten is just no, I'm just here to make jokes and keep things shallow, and we're going to keep this just on the flirty, silly scale. But deep down, there's some scars in there.
He's a definitely more renegade kind of character, but as you dig a little deeper, you realize he is very guarded and doesn't let anyone get close, to the point where he plays Pazark, which is the card game in Star Wars, in his head as a way to protect from people reading his mind, like Jedis looking too deep and uncovering his secrets. Like, he's got a lot to his character, and it's so fascinating, and I love it.
He appears so shallow on the surface. I dig it.
Even
as just from a storyline standpoint, not from his handsome, rugged good looks.
And I love that depending on how you treat him throughout the game can depend on the outcome at the end. For those who manage to play through to the end, you can impact whether he lives or dies.
If your video game
you hold his life in his hand.
If your save file remains intact until the end of the game. Which it hasn't happened on some occasions for me.
Well, I'm talking more about the modified one where it's got all of that, but yeah.
I was just making yet another dig at the incomplete mess that was shipped of Star Wars The Knights of the Old Republic 2. Having said that, when it did launch, I played it 2 days in a row for 14 hours each. So I loved it, and my eyeballs hurt after that. And a friend actually showed up to my house and said, I'm taking you out of this house because you look terrible. So there we go. That's my story of how I fell in love with Star Wars The Knights of the Old Republic 2.
So with the Sith Lords, who did you romance?
Well, before we get there, we're not done with you yet.
Oh, really?
Because the key main character that you play as has a magnetic personality.
Yes, they do.
Through various plot points, you discover that people are drawn to you, and it's almost unexplainable, but it is in the plot there. Which means, unlike a lot of the other games of this style where you have to actually go out and pursue romances, they come flocking to you in this game.
Yes, they do.
Which means, regardless if you play as a guy or a girl, you end up basically in a love triangle without you having to really do anything. For the female playthrough, which you did, you had Atten Rand or you had the Disciple.
Yes. This is a really important point for me. Maybe not for other people, but he's voiced by the same voice actor that voices Cullen in Dragon Age. And when I replayed Sith Lords recently and I realized who it was, I'm like, oh, Atten, you in trouble.
Something you thought, I will never betray Atten. He's my one true love. Oh, hello.
Whew.
Who's having the real love triangle here? It's Jem.
Oh, dear, this is getting weird. It didn't take long.
Now, the Disciple is all he has as a title. He doesn't even get a real name unless you dig really deep. He's a scholar, a studier of the Jedi arts, but much more intellectually based, not practical. But using your magnetic personality, of course, you can influence him to change his life trajectory. So overall, is it Atten or is it Disciple who gets the nod from you?
I feel like I need to replay it and I'll get back to you. My canon was Atten, so I feel like that should be my answer. I always like to say my canon playthrough is my true. like my initial gut reactions for the first time going through. So, but yeah, I like them both. This is one of those things I'm like, I feel guilty for saying that because that sounds really mean and lazy, but.
And promiscuous.
A little, yeah.
Now, for me with KOTOR 2, it was a bit more interesting because the two options for a male playthrough in that are a character called Visus Ma, who, speaking of voice actors influencing your affections, Kelly Hu is actually her name. And she was a sub-character on a martial arts show I used to watch, so I was very familiar with her work and her voice, and I liked her, and everyone was happy about that if your name was Brendo and you were playing that game. And the other option is the Handmaiden, who is a fully regimented, disciplined Jedi apprentice, and she will not do anything differently than what the rules say. I didn't particularly like either of those characters. And unfortunately, if they're the only two options, that's not a fun time for romance.
Oh.
There was another character that I was, in the game sense, attracted to called Mira.
Mm-hmm.
And she,
redheaded girl.
She is flirty. She has a Wookiee that's trying to chase her down and kill her because it has a life debt on her and does not want it. So how do you end a life debt? You kill the person who it's indebted to.
Wait, that feels backwards.
Mira is what was my type in video games at that point, so I wanted to romance her. And if you start getting flirty and start going, well, hey, how about it there, Mira? She basically shoots you down with the, sorry, you're too old for me.
Ouch.
Which is savage, let's just say. And secondly, she says that it's just too complicated. If I start a relationship with her, the other girls on the ship are going to hate her, and she's going to have to kick their butts, and yeah, it just gets messy. Never even gets off the ground. The romance option I wanted, so I was heartbroken, and then went, yeah.
Not all romances end happily.
I also wish that you could romance HK-47, just because I cannot imagine the pillow talk that would happen there.
Oh my goodness. I mean, if you
Meatbags,
played Dark Side, you never know. Let's change the subject really quickly, please, because it's getting weird. Yeah, okay. On to the next. So that was our first, I guess, as far as video game romances and kind of the bar that was set for anything else that we kind of consider worthy and you know, being able to see a progression and from when they meet to the love blossoming to potentially seeing whether it works out or not. I think are key ingredients as to what makes a good romance story to have. It doesn't have to be the main part of the game, but it can add a lot to the gaming experience.
Yeah, for sure. Now, let's change gears a little bit. We will get back to more games where we had options and choices, and we'll cover those a little bit later. But for now, I want to talk about one of the most realistic relationship scenes in any video game that I have ever played. And that, surprisingly, was in a video game called The Darkness. A game that you wouldn't go near with a 10-foot pole because it's...
But I have heard a lot about that, though.
First-person shooter, you have sort of evil superpowers that get given to you when you get, how shall we say, betrayed and shot by people. On near death, you get superpowers that bring you back to life with evil tentacle creature things, as everybody wants if they're on death's door. You'll accept any power that's given to you. Jackie Estacado is the character you play as, and that is a man, despite the name. Almost every Jackie I know is
Jackie
a female.
Chan.
Well, there you go. I was talking about martial arts before and didn't even make that connection. But his romance with his girlfriend in the game, they have a scene. First person, you are sitting on a couch, watching TV, and just spending time together. And
that sounds familiar.
It is basically, you know, our weekly evening experience a lot of the times when I'm not working. A night together on the couch watching a movie or something. And what's on the TV, you might ask, during this scene? It's To Kill a Mockingbird.
Aww.
And unlike a lot of video games, if there is a TV, it will be on like a 3-minute rotation cycle. And then once you've seen everything there is to see, well, there's no point continuing this scene, so we'll just continue. To Kill a Mockingbird, it's the entire movie.
Did they pay for the licensing of
You
that?
can watch the entirety of To Kill a Mockingbird in first person with a digital girlfriend in the darkness, which sounds more pathetic than I meant it to be. But it is sweet. It's a sweet thing. It's up to you how long this scene goes for. You don't have to watch the entire runtime, but if you want to, the option's there.
It's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's heartbreaking, but it's still worth watching and worth reading for those who've never read it. Anyway, just veering off.
So it's just one of those things that it can't be done in any other media. You can't have a movie inside of another movie that you can choose how long to watch it with. You don't have the option of how long will this scene last? How long do I want to enjoy this scene before the next scene begins? You know, that player choice, even just a little thing like that, is completely in the power of the player in the darkness, and I loved it. I didn't watch the whole movie because I don't have the attention span for something like that, and I believe
watching a whole movie.
I may have actually rented the darkness, so I had a timeline to keep to.
True that. That's really interesting, though. You hear of people licensing other materials and things that are copyrighted for that to make pop culture references and stuff in their games, but to have the whole thing in there, that's really interesting. And I wonder how hard it was to get the permission and rights and stuff to do that, because they're basically redistributing a whole movie. So, anyways,
very strange. It's an interesting case in video gaming.
Yeah, that fascinates me. Another more modern, I guess, video game with story arcs through it. Life is Strange. And this gives you two options. The main one that you kind of would say is that the game pushes for is Max and Chloe, who is your best friend, and you save her life at the beginning of the game when you discover your powers, and you see this friendship be rediscovered, basically, a childhood friendship that has kind of come back around. And you can either choose to just stay friends, or you can develop it further, or Max can pursue a relationship with Warren, depending on your choices. And I mean, this game is very choice heavy. That's the whole point of that style of gameplay.
Now, Max, the protagonist you play as in Life is Strange, we labelled her as one of the greatest video game female protagonists ever in an earlier episode available at thegaminglovers.com.
Yes.
I loved playing as Max. She's a good kid.
She's sweet. She's relatable. She has a lot of anxiety and stuff. I think when you listen to her in a monologuing throughout the game, so many people can relate.
Yeah. Personally, I could not say no to Warren because he was basically who I was in high school. The hi Max. You know, he's the nice guy who sort of is like, oh, I like her. I don't really want to tell her that because it's too embarrassing and I'm afraid of getting shot down and stuff.
Hey, Warren takes a beating for her in like the first chapter of the story, and I'm like, that's very sweet. Chloe, for me, and I know she's like considered the main romance because the whole story revolves around trying to save her life. For me, though, I'm like, Chloe annoyed the heck out of me so many times. I'm like, you're not the best friend. Like, you're being so impatient with me. So I would crack it with her and be like, no, if you're going to try to put the moves on me, no, I'm turning you down. But that was like personal preference. And I love that you had that choice and you can see the results of that as well. So with the multiple endings and stuff like that, it's really gratifying to see it can go so many different ways based on these choices.
Yes, and being a responsible adult, I had to say no to Chloe because she offered Max drugs, and I don't like that. So sorry, that was a turning point for me. Now, one of the great video game forum debates of the most recent decade, I discovered when I was trying to see some research in a series that I have played a bit of, but not enough to give my personal perspective on this series. But when it comes to video game romances, we've talked about the sweet childhood relationships. We've talked about the awkwardness of trying to communicate your feelings to others. And then there's also the more intimate aspects of relationships that come further along. And what encapsulates that part the most is probably The Witcher. It's rated R for a reason, let's put it that way.
Yes.
But if you put the question to the gaming public of who is the best choice for Geralt out of Triss and Yennefer,
so much debate about those two.
there are some people who would take their stance, plant their flag in the ground and say, yes, I choose Triss. And there are some people who say, no, that's definitely wrong. I would rate the horse higher than Triss. And it has happened. In a poll, I saw that Roach did outrank Triss in one specific forum. So that's a true story. The interesting thing about this is that there are some people, if there is extra material of a series, you should probably enjoy that to get the most out of the game. If there is a book on a movie and the book has like a prequel and you want to get the most setting before you watch the movie, you read the books. There are 7, maybe 8 Witcher books that are available. And the thing is, if you read those, people like to have their Geralt, even though you can have your choices in the games, they like to put them in line and role play as the true Geralt, which is where the discussion and the debate starts to become ridiculous because you got people saying, I read the books and you must be Yennefer. And they're like, I read the books and I don't care, I'm choosing Triss. And it just becomes a mishmash. You start off the first Witcher game with the old amnesia. I don't know who I am, but there's a woman here called Triss and she knows me and we have a history and therefore I feel safe here. And so I will now choose Triss over anyone else because we have a history. But then you find out in later games there's another woman called Yennefer who you have a longer history that you've forgotten about. So then do you then switch your allegiance to the person you have more history with, less history with, more recent history? Oh, that's a little kettle of fish.
Yep.
If someone loses their memory, do you still have relationship ties with them?
Well, here's a question for you. If I lost my memory and I don't remember ever getting married to you, are we still married?
That's the thing, because I would still have feelings for you, but your feelings for me have been either
Erased?
covered or gone forever, which
That's a little
means
heartbreaking.
I would have to court you again, and maybe the modern Brendo is not your cup of tea without all the backstory and the history. Very interesting. It's an interesting aspect with that. So it's just one of the great debates.
And you can't really try for both. That doesn't end well. Just put it that way, guys. No trying to play the field. The girls will turn on you. Which is kind of satisfying in its own way to see them outwit him in that area. So games like that give you a bit of choice. I don't think there is any wrong choice. I think you play how you want to.
Yeah, for a lot of those games where you do have a choice, I will either play as myself, basically, which helps if you're creating a fresh character from a clean slate with no existing history. You get to name the character, choose what they look like. I will probably make a version of myself and make the choices similar to what I would choose in that situation if I was in this magical world. There's also the option to actually role play a character. Like people role play the true Geralt. Or if I'm playing a Dragon Age game as a female mage, I'm like, well, this is clearly not me, but I'm going to role play. This is my woman and she likes this and does not like this. And that's how I'm playing through the game. So there's no real detriment to making different choices than other people. You just have to be accepting of their options. And thirdly, you should probably not rate a horse above a woman as far as a romance option. That's my PSA for the day.
Oh, so many things I want to say to that, but I'm just going to move on instead. And since you mentioned it, let's go into Dragon Age.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to be here a while, people. Get comfortable.
If you know anything about Jem, you knew this was coming. We'll just have to let her get her rant out right now.
Rant? I don't know. This is not a rant. Rant usually implies anger. This is gushing.
Oh, this is love. This is not anger. This is Dragon Age.
I think it kind of came into my mind anyway as we were speaking about The Witcher and people fighting over the best love interests. And there is a bit of controversy with certain characters, especially with Inquisition. There's one that is very polarizing, and that's Solus. people either love this character or hate this character, and there is no middle ground. Especially in the fan forums, it is vicious. And
I'm seeing a pattern here in forums.
yes, people get really, passionate, and that's okay. Like, be excited about what characters that you love, but that doesn't mean you can insult other people for choosing differently. Like, that's... Anyway. Freedom of choice is what makes these games great.
Agreed.
And Solus is an interesting, fascinating character to me, and I'm looking forward to learning more about him. I'm really doing my best to not mention spoilers. But I am in the camp of I like his character. Brendo, not so much.
To be fair, I was role-playing Shamgar.
Yeah, Shamgar the Destroyer.
Shamgar the... insert adjective here, which changed many times through my game. My Kunari male, who was a powerhouse, did not like anything supernatural at the start of the game, and because Solus likes to, how would you word his interest in the evil creatures, spirits, ghosts?
Well, they're not necessarily all evil. Any creature from the Fade, the spirit realm, I guess, he sees them as allies and friends. And he's upset when they are called to, I guess, this side, like the real world, and they become manifestations of evil. So like rage demons or hunger or desire demons, like worse aspects of, human nature, I guess is the term we would use for it. I don't know if that really applies in Dragon Age when they're not all humans.
Human nature for dwarves.
But the parts of us that are kind of ugly, these spirits, when they're in the Fade, Solus sees them as virtuous spirits, that things of honor and valor and knowledge and all these kinds of things, and then when they get summoned to the real world are tainted by whoever is summoning them, and then they get ruined. And so that's why he gets very protective and angry, because he knows more about that realm than he lets on. And that's all I will say, because I'm really treading like that line of spoilers.
Well, that's in Inquisition.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the start of the series, another game that we've both played, another game that had quite some good romance, but of course would have to be among the highest echelon of romance options for yourself. Have you ever licked a lamp pole in winter?
A lamppost.
A lamppost, sorry. Knew I'd get that wrong.
I'm not answering that question on here.
I was just quoting Alistair from Dragon Age Origins.
We love Alistair. Oh my goodness. Dragon Age Origins is just such a great game, and even now I think everyone compares other additions in the series back to the first game because it's so good.
Yeah.
It doesn't have many romance options, but it still has enough. It has, I think, 4 key party members. So you've got Alistair, who is only there for female characters. You've got Morrigan is there for only male characters. Liliana and Zevran can go both ways. And they're all really interesting, well-rounded characters and very fun to get to know. And some take a little more work. Like Zevran is easy to romance, but very difficult to actually get to commit post,
Deed.
nookie. Getting him to be like trustworthy and also open with you, like that is more of a challenge than some of the other characters, like to truly get that point. Because if you say the wrong things and don't collect, like you have to actually find key gifts and things as you play the game too, in order to continue and get the right ending and win over their loyalty 100%.
You seem surprised that someone who's sent to assassinate you is hard to get to commit to romancing you.
But hey, he's sworn his life to you. I mean, you can and you have kill him immediately and never have him in your parties to begin with.
Another one of my great role-playing experience of Grum, the angry dwarf who would answer every situation with bloodshed.
Yep.
Jem was horrified.
Yep. Anyways.
Was Alistair your first Dragon Age romance?
Yes.
Of course he was, because you can't say no to a man that funny and witty and charming.
Oh, he's sweet. He's adorkable.
He is adorkable.
And he's kind of going through the same kind of trauma as you, having just being freshly wardened, I guess, added to the Grey Wardens, and everyone else getting wiped out. So you're both feeling lost and a little worried about having to build up an army all by yourselves. So I think that's a bonding experience as far as story and character development. And the more you learn about Alistair, he's a really fascinating character because there's a lot more to him than meets the eye. And he's a character that sometimes is an easy target for criticism, though, too. Some people think that he's so wishy-washy and he's such a chicken and he's, has no backbone. I'm like, but part of the story is you helping him become stronger and building him up so he'll be ready to make decisions and stand on his own 2 feet.
But be careful what you wish for, because by getting him over that line, you can alter his personality to the point where he's not as fun.
Yes, to the point where he might dump you because he feels like the responsibilities he has to take on can't include you in it. And when you're not prepared for that, it can be quite a shock.
I've helped make you strong, Alistair. Why you leave me like this?
How can you do this to me? No, it's okay.
This is bringing up all sorts of old wounds.
No, I'm fine.
Jem.
No, I managed to say I usually have a pretty good hunch of the right responses with those sort of discussions, that I can talk my way back out of the bad situations that unfold. So I'm all good.
Cool. I'm so glad. Now, can you guess what my first Dragon Age relationship was out of that field?
If you're playing as...
I was playing as a male.
Was this before Grum?
Before Grum, my very first playthrough.
I would assume Liliana.
You would assume wrong.
Ooh, Morrigan.
Yes, because she was so forward. And I could not say no to that. She's a character who is basically, you get bad vibes from her from the get-go. She is basically a manipulative witch of the woods. And then she says she's so cold and lonely in my tent by myself. And you're like, well, yep, that seems like an excellent idea. Let's go for that.
I'm going to get heat for this, but what a male response. She asked, I'm like, how can I say no?
Well, after that, I'm like, well, that's not even a proper romance storyline. What's going on here? I didn't like that canonically at all. Then I don't know if it was the same playthrough. I don't think it was. It might have been a secondary playthrough where I romanced Liliana. Much more depth to that. Much better. But as the series progressed, Morrigan plays a larger role than I originally thought. And so I think maybe canonically Morrigan is the choice for myself.
You also have the DLC, which comes with Dragon Age Origins, Witch Hunt, which, without going into too much details, is basically another chance to have more time with Morrigan. And you can make some pretty big game choices in that DLC. And I always recommend people play that, especially if you have romanced Morrigan. That is almost like crucial DLC to play, because you can make a really pivotal decision that will then, you'll hear about the consequences of that decision in Inquisition.
Yep.
And I love that carries over, and I love hearing about what has happened in those years that you don't get to see what's happened to the Grey Warden while you're playing Dragon Age 2, and you're like, what's going on? I wish I knew. And you hear whispers, but not really much concrete.
Yeah.
So having things confirmed in Inquisition, it was so gratifying and really cool seeing and hearing Morrigan talk about those decisions that are made in the third game.
Yeah, well, some of these romances we're talking about, you only get to see, hours, days, weeks at times. But when you have consequences or you have character-affecting moments that go on for years because of this romance, now that's long-lasting effects.
Yes.
Speaking of Dragon Age DLC, how did you find Awakening, the original core DLC for the first Dragon Age?
I love and hate it. I love it because it's almost like its own game. There's so much content in it, and we finally get to meet Anders, although he has Cullen's voice. Very
here
confusing.
We go again with Cullen's voice. You and Cullen's voice. Why don't you just marry Cullen's voice?
Oh, if I could. Kidding. that you can't actually you can flirt with people, but you can't romance anyone in Awakening. But if you have romanced Alistair, Alistair can make an appearance, depending on key decisions. There's a lot of ifs, and I'm being careful about what I say, because spoilers. Alistair can make an appearance at the beginning of Awakening, and you can have a cute little interaction, but that's all. So
let's move on before we lose too many people's attention. Dragon Age 2, who gets your nod for romance option there?
Fenris. Gotta be Fenris. As much as I do love Anders, Anders is... He's another polarizing character of either people love him or hate him because of what he does. And there's so much I want to say, but I can't.
Why is Fenris the choice?
Because he's awesome. And I think that half of my decision comes down to the voice actors and their performance, because my goodness, he's got an incredible voice, for one. But he's a really interesting character, and one that it's kind of interesting to see him heal. If you choose to romance him, he is happy to flirt at first, but then once you kind of hit a really pivotal point in the relationship, he freaks out and backs away. Mm-hmm. And so you have to choose to stay loyal to him, because if you try and romance somebody else, then he will forever just stay back, but he'll wear like a little ribbon around his wrist to show that he still cares, which is a little sad. But if you stay loyal, if you don't pursue anybody else, then eventually you can, after 3 years or something of waiting, you can pick up where you left off. So it's one of those slow burn but rewarding in the end. I do really love Sebastian as well, but you don't get as much because he's a DLC character. He's not as fleshed out, and you don't get as many scenes or moments, I guess, that carry that story forward. So it's a little hollow. Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah.
my canonical playthrough of Dragon Age 2 was with a violence-heavy character once again. It seems to be my theme through the Dragon Age games.
Yes.
Argus Hawk was his name, and he held a mighty large sword. And his choices were... Isabella said, "Hey, how about it?" But that's not what he was about. So you can't say it was a male response there. He actually ended up romancing Meryl, the Dalish elf, who is shunned because of her interest in blood magic. Mm-hmm. And because he liked blood and liked to extract blood from enemies' bodies, he thought, yes, that's very arousing. That's all we'll get into there. And Dragon Age Inquisition, Shamgar, the brutal, the gorgeous, the handsome, the mighty, romanced Cassandra. And that was almost out of necessity because I found all of the options in Dragon Age Inquisition quite poop.
Sadly, if you play through as a male, you don't get as many options as the chicks do. I think if you play as a female elf in Inquisition, you have 6 romance options, whereas guys are pretty limited comparatively.
I didn't find any of them attractive, just even on a physical scale. And you need that spark of interest.
I find Iron Bull very amusing, regardless of species or gender. He's, I think, the most flexible. What?
I don't know if that should be stated before showing your interest in a romance.
No, but I'm
regardless of species or gender.
I'm saying that no matter what you choose, because you can be a Canary, you can be elf, you can be dwarf, you can be human.
It just sounded...
It doesn't matter. He's good to go. Whereas others, like Solus, will only romance you if you're a female elf. Cullen will only romance female elves or humans. And he was my canonical romance because it's Cullen. And finally... Yes, I think everyone saw that one coming. But I love that he is just, it is the epitome of like a sweet blossoming romance, that story arc. Because I've done many playthroughs, surprise, surprise. And compared to so many of the others, like it is a healthier relationship, and you can play a part in helping him recover from his lyrium addiction and supporting him through that. And so that's a really fascinating story, and seeing that character development too. I still to this day find it more gratifying than most of the other options. But Iron Bull is one of the more fun ones if you want romance with comedy That is hilarious.
Nothing says rom-com like a giant bull man. Splendid.
But it still hits the feels too. So I don't know. Like for me, like you choose what speaks to you. There is no wrong choice, and that's what those games are all about.
All right. Overall choice for a Dragon Age romance option. Who gets the nod? Who's the king of the hill?
I don't know. I would used to say Alistair, but it might be Cullen.
Bloody Cullen. So sick of Cullen. All right, let's move on now that we've allocated 60% of this podcast's runtime to Dragon Age. And let's go for something. Let's have a little look at what true romance sounds like from a little game series called Monkey Island.
Yes.
I'm just a drifter, a nobody, a would-be pirate. Who would have known or even cared if you'd let me drown?
I would have, Guybrush.
Oh.
Oh, Governor.
Oh, Threepwood.
Oh, Elaine.
This acting.
Guybrush.
This is hurting
Muffin.
me.
Sugar Boots.
Honey Pumpkin.
Plunder Bunny.
Kiss me.
No.
What is that acting? Anna, please tell me that's done deliberately like that, like to be...
Excuse me, the delivery of Plunder Bunny will go down in the history of great romance video game lines.
Oh my goodness.
Now, the Monkey Island series originally was very early on the early computers, point-and-click adventure. There was no voice acting back then. But that
suppose that
clip
makes
was
sense.
from the remake, like the remastered remake. It's somewhere in that line. Elaine and Guybrush Threepwood. What a iconic video gaming couple. Now, this is your typical Princess Leia situation where you go to rescue the damsel in distress, only to discover she doesn't quite need rescuing because she's fully capable and actually can kick butt herself. Something that definitely flies in the face of the traditional damsel in distress, which was a welcome addition to video game history, and Elaine finds her way up near the top of many great video game female character leads.
Oh, Plunder Bunny. I think it's time for a break. More romance after this.
You're listening to the Gaming Lovers Podcast. Want to join the conversation? Visit thegaminglovers.com. Record your comment or question by clicking on the button on the right-hand side. And you could be featured in the next podcast.
All right, Sugar Boots.
All right, Plunder Bunny.
I think there is one iconic gaming series with many famous couples that we need to touch on in this episode of The Gaming Lovers.
Final Fantasy.
Yes.
Now, a game series that I found my way into at Final Fantasy VIII. I discovered it by reading a walkthrough that was in a magazine that I got. And you don't get any plot points in that, just the actions, the locations, the boss strategies. And I thought, that's interesting. This sounds amazing. Little did I know that Final Fantasy VIII, at its core, is a love story.
One of the best.
You start off playing as a guarded, almost apparently emotionless young adult, late teen, called Squall. And Squall's favourite response to almost any obstacle he faces in life is a sharp whatever. Because that is the way we all feel at that age, surely. And he meets a woman later in his life, and she's full of energy and passion and spirit and has a cause she wants to fight for. And he doesn't know what to make of this. And then as they spend time together, they sort of help each other adjust to experiencing feelings and emotions, and then love may blossom. And Eyes on Me is still one of the most moving bits of video game music I've ever heard, and I love it. You're lucky you didn't walk down the aisle to that. But when I talk about Final Fantasy and its romance plots, I still think that as great as Final Fantasy VIII is, and I love it, it's underappreciated. We are all for Squall, but Final Fantasy X is my favourite romance plotline from a JRPG. Most likely, I will put that out there without having thought about it properly. But Tidus and Yuna, My goodness.
So sweet.
Titus shows up and has no idea how he got to this strange world, because this wasn't his world. He was in another world. Then he got sucked into the thing, and now he's in a world he doesn't understand, doesn't know, but he's optimistic, he's jovial, he's everything that Squall is not, and he helps a young lady who appears guarded, very serious, very, I have a mission to do, and I can't become attached to anybody because I need to focus on my mission. Titus brings out the laughs, the overly scripted, quote-unquote, poorly delivered laughs to help her, get through the stress. Hey, you need to lighten up a bit. And of course, as time goes on, she does lighten up a little bit, and they spend a lovely evening in a forest together, and it's just moving and romancy, and I love it. And then comes the twist, because every time, I'm sure we've all experienced this, if you have your eye on someone, and then along comes Seymour. We've all had a Seymour in our lives. Seymour is one of the antagonists of Final Fantasy X, who is very charming. Everyone respects him and loves him, except for two of your characters. Tidus and Auron both don't like him from the get-go. There's something fishy about this man. But he ends up wanting to marry Yuna and plans a wedding ceremony, and suddenly Tidus is in jail and you can't do anything about it. The woman that he has feelings for is going to get married to someone else. We've all been there.
Have we all?
And so how can you possibly overcome this? You break out of jail and you try to crash a wedding by sliding down giant chains out of the sky to crash. Oh, it's a fantastic scene. I love it. I dig it. And Seymour can suck it, because I hate him so much. There are very few antagonists in games that I've hated as much as Seymour, and I think most of it is because I want to see Tidus and Yuna together, and he is the biggest obstacle, and hot damn, I would punch him in his weird blue face. No, his hair's blue, but I'm just flustered with furious romance rage.
Oh, man. It is definitely a point of debate online a lot of what is the best romance out of all the different Final Fantasy entries. And 10 and 8 are easily ones that are brought up over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm. A couple of the others have less pronounced romance subplots, but 8 and 10 definitely are worth playing. And if you're looking for love,
it's the kind of thing, though, that would make for, I think, could translate into movies or like a TV series really well, because most Final Fantasy games are quite, at least with their story, linear, so they would be fun, like, to see all of that with Tidus and Yuna in its glory on the big...
Tidus. How dare you? That's how
Tidus.
Everyone assumed it was pronounced
Tidus,
before it was actually voiced in a later, like in Kingdom Hearts 1, I think it's the first time it ever got voiced. Everyone's like, Tidus? What? But he's got like a water sword, so surely his name is Tidus, right? Because tide, it's the water. It's fine. It was one of those mistakes that I don't want you to edit out because it's actually important to the narrative.
No, but people know I got it wrong. That's okay. It happens. Sorry, Tidus. Sorry, James Arnold Taylor. I've let you down. All right, let's move on to one of my favourite series. And one that I was a little unsure of because we had said no, like visual novel kind of style games. We were trying to avoid that in this list, but it kind of walks that line of visual novel and JRPG, and that's Persona. Mm-hmm. Now, the Persona series gives you a whole harem of girls to choose from.
You make it sound so wonderful.
I say it's like you have choice, but it's you pretty much always play as a guy, with the exception of Persona 3 when they added the female protagonists.
Persona 3 Portable specifically.
Yes.
Let's not mislead the fans.
Not the original and not Fez, but still. So there are plenty of incredible romances and plenty of options depending on what personality you're drawn to, I guess. Going back to number 3, you've got Yukari, who kind of seems like to be like the main canon, the one that they push to the point where her arcana is called the Lovers. It's like, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This is the girl you should romance. She's in the same age as you, and she's the girl that you meet right away, and you have to help save her life at the very beginning. Whereas if you play as a girl in Persona 3, you've got Akihiko. Weirdly, you have Ken, who is in elementary school, which is like, there's a bit of an age gap and it's a little weird.
Let's establish right here and now that this is high school romance, quote unquote, high school relationships.
Yes.
There's nothing seedy here.
It's not like you're an
playing
adult.
As a high school student
Yes.
romancing other high school students.
Yes.
It's not myself, who's 33 years old, romancing people under 18 because that's not allowed.
No, all of these you're always in like that high school bracket. Usually like second year, I think, always seems to be the year they decide to have these protagonists discover their powers. Anyway,
well, you didn't go to Japanese high school because that's exactly what happened. You get magical powers in second year of high school.
Oh man, I missed out. Should have done a year abroad. Year 11, I think that would be the equivalent of in
And
Australia.
then you would fit perfectly into that trope of being the foreign exchange student who shows up midterm. Because it always happens.
Perfect.
Anyway, your choices of Persona 3 Portable.
Yes. So Akihiko, Ken, you've also got Shinjiro, who, slight spoiler alert, you can save his life as the girl if you do the romance and you get the item that you need, which you don't have that option doing the male playthrough. So I think that's really cool. With the males, you've got Mitsuru, Fuka, and of course Yukari. And
Let's not forget our wonderful romance robot, Igus.
Yes, and I think she's a fan favourite as far as romances go. She tends to get the most love online, at least what I've seen. Persona 4.
Well, hang on. You didn't say who you chose. Stop jumping ahead and answer the question. Do you like goofball Junpei?
Well, you can't romance Junpei. He's not an option.
Because he has his other romance
He's
plot.
got a locked-in thing.
All right, well, let me put it this way then. Would you prefer Akihiko, the protein-fueled meathead, or Shinjiro, the stereotypical bad boy?
Who can
I know
cook?
it's coming down to those two.
Who can cook? I honestly, I do enjoy the story for Akihiko, and I think for that character that's set in that world that they pair well. But if it was me, literally me choosing between those two, it would be Shinjiro because I would get along, and frankly, Akihiko would probably drive me up the wall with his non-stop talk about protein.
Oh, I need protein.
Talk about something
lift
else.
some weight. So I gotta punch this punching bag. Oh, I need some protein.
As ripped as he is in the fighting games, I would still go, I think, with Shinji, personally. But
Perfect.
yeah, that's...
Well, my first playthrough of Persona 3, I romanced Yukari. Primarily because Mitsuru requires you to have an incredible amount of academic skills, which I did not have. And it got to the point in the game where I'm like, I don't think I'm going to have enough time to get my skill up high enough to even catch her eye. So I chose Yukari by default. But I actually quite liked it. So sometimes settling for something is good. Not that I know in my marriage. Let me just put that out there. Woof.
Oh, my goodness.
Now,
All right.
Persona 4, you
Yeah.
don't have the choice of a female protagonist, so this
No.
is you shipping the protagonist, known as Yu Narakami in later games. Who do you ship him with out of the available choices of ladies?
My first playthrough of that, I actually went with Yukiko. I kind of liked the idea of Chie and Yosuke because to me they are kind of like us.
Yeah.
I'm like Chie have violent tendencies, and I'm a carnivore and a bit dorky. I'm like that. I was Chie in high school, and Yosuke was the guy that she'd always fight with, and that was you. So
And to be fair, my personality is basically 98% Yosuke, I'm pretty sure.
So for me, I'm like, that makes sense. And then because the core four of the group are Yosuke and Yu, Chie and Yukiko, so it made sense to then pair Yukiko with Yu. And she's very sweet, and it was a really cute relationship to see blossom. And this is the kind of thing that people argue because every option is a good option.
If we thought there was debate about The Witcher as far as who's the canonical choice, if you just put the words "who is best girl" on any Persona-based discussion, it's on.
Like
it
Donkey
is.
Kong.
There's fists flying. It's crazy.
Yeah, digital fists. A lot of people will say Chie is best girl, but because I just personally see Chie with Yosuke, I'm like, I can't touch that. So I happy to be besties, like good friends with Chie as far as Yu Narukami is concerned. But yeah, you had a different playthrough though.
Well, I've played through Persona 4 multiple times because I really, really enjoyed it. My first playthrough, I romanced Rise, the idol who has fame and all the problems that come with being famous, including stalkers and pressures and managers harassing her and all sorts of things. She was the sort of character that, again, all right, maybe I have a type where she's like, hey, you know,
I believe she has the Lover's Arcana too, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's like, hang out with me because I'm cool. And
she's always like grabbing the arm and like doesn't know personal space compared to the others. She's like not afraid to stake her claim that senpai is mine.
Yeah, I liked her, and with all of these characters, it's basically you learn their insecurities and help them overcome their trials and tribulations in their life. I enjoyed that playthrough. And then on my second playthrough, I made the true, only responsible choice one can make, and I romanced everybody. The beauty of the Persona games is that you can, you know, fill out one person's friendship into a relationship. Perfect. We are together. And then you can do it with someone else and not technically tell the first person that it's over. And then you can keep going and have like 6 on the go at once. The problem happens is that on certain dates like Christmas or the troublesome Valentine's Day, is that you can only choose one to hang out with. So you get all these messages and phone calls from the girls saying, hey, we got plans on Christmas Day. And you're like, yeah, I'm busy that day. I can't hang out with my girlfriend that day because I made some other plans. So sorry. But then if on Valentine's Day you do have multiple romances, guess who shows up at your house? It's everyone with presents. And then, you are in trouble. But on that, I did choose, this may be a consolation prize for her, but I did choose Chie to spend all those special dates with, and I greatly enjoyed the time spent with what I think is actually my best girl of the Persona 4
Well,
entry.
that's because she's like me, right?
It's just unfortunate that she was just one of my 6 side girls.
There better not be other... Just telling you now, mister.
Oh, no. It cost me far too much time and money to do that just with one woman. One relationship is enough for me. Thank you very much.
Naoto's another interesting one, though, too. The boy detective who's secretly a girl. And I love that she's kind of intellectually on the same level as Yu Narukami. I think they make a good match in that sense. But again, I still prefer the pairing of her and Kanji because they're such opposites that I'm like, I'll leave that alone. It feels too mean to do that to Kanji.
Now, you have tried to play Persona Q twice and have failed to play Persona Q twice.
Yes.
And I said you could use a guide as long as it was spoiler-free up to at least do the second dungeon, and you never did.
I started the second dungeon.
But if you go through the second dungeon in Persona Q, it is a group date cafe, and you get asked questions as you make your way through the dungeon. And they'll be simple questions. Do you like sweet or sour foods, etc., etc.? A whole bunch of questions, which, of course, like any good internet quiz, will give you your perfect match. And it will you will have a wedding ceremony with the character that it determines you are chosen to be with.
Nice.
And for myself, when I played, I answered from the heart, and it was Naoto.
There you go.
So there you go. I found her attractive as well. So basically what I'm saying is I like them all in Persona 4, and my true playthrough is the one where I romanced everyone.
I love it.
And Persona 5 came out recently in the last couple of years. Another great variety of choices. Another male protagonist only, so you will unfortunately be having to ship them because you are not male, and it's not, I hope you're not, just on a personal level. But for that one, I chose Makoto to be my true playthrough in that. She is the studious, student council, focused, determined academic.
By day.
And then...
Badass by night.
Badass by night, yeah. But
with
she,
a biker chick outfit.
as always, has insecurities. And my runner-up would probably be Futaba, because she's the scared, anxious nerd.
She's the gamer girl with all the meta references that we all love.
I dig it.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun. She'd be a good person to be like friends with for sure. So in Persona 5, you start off with Ann, who I think is the Lover's Arcana. Always good to have one.
Lover's Arcana.
And she's a ditzy model, but she's also a very faithful friend and a very sweet person once you can get past her ditziness a little bit. But it's endearing ditziness, You get Makoto, Futaba, Haru, who is the sweet rich girl, and who honestly from like the ads and trailers, I thought she was going to be really catty, but she is so sweet. Like, I wish she got introduced earlier because I'm kind of sad at how little screen time she actually gets in the game.
Yeah, she comes into the team very late.
And there's actually a couple of romance options that are outside of schoolmates. And this is where this game kind of skirts the line of inappropriateness because you're playing as a teenage character, but I think the game developers are aware that people that play these games are actually older than that, and so they're giving them options that are a little more mature. So you have a teacher that you can romance, as well as a local doctor and a reporter. So you've got 3 older ladies that you can woo as well.
You just got to wait a couple of months until he turns 18. It's all good.
The whole theming of Persona 5 is that you are the Phantom Thief, so you are doing things that are considered slightly illegal anyway. So it's
You're making this sound so bad.
It's got an edge, like you're saving the world, but like it has an edgier tone. It's more mature, I think, than any of the other games in this series.
This one crime against the law is fine because I do so many others. That's all we're saying.
It's interesting though, like, because you can do the option where you romance everyone again, and you have that same issue of getting discovered on Valentine's Day again by everybody. And I believe there's a scene like once they all appear at the coffee shop, you get beat to a pummel.
Yeah.
So that can be somewhat satisfying to actually watch though. So there's that too.
So who did you ship the Persona 5 protagonist with?
My canon was Makoto. I loved her. I think she was one of my favourite characters just in the whole game. Honestly, there are other characters that I liked, but that, if I was playing as a female protagonist, it would go...
That was be my next question. If you had the option...
There's 2 options that I'm like, I so wish they were options to romance. Ryuji, your best bud from the very beginning, I'm like, he's irritating at times, but he's still one of my favourite characters. And I think I actually like him more in second playthroughs, but also Akechi. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to say anything to spoil the game, but like Akechi is a fascinating character and there's chemistry there, and I really wish you had that option. So maybe one day it'll come out on the portable and they'll give us more options. Females, please. More female protagonists, please. A girl can dream.
All right, let's switch gears again back to a linear narrative and what gets my rubber stamp of approval for the greatest portrayal of a relationship in a video game series that grows and has setbacks and grows again and has more setbacks and issues and marriage and separation and resolution and this, that, the other. Uncharted. Nathan Drake and Elena Fisher. Is that her name?
That is.
Well, not for too long because she becomes Elena Drake, I assume.
I think that's well established. It is really satisfying to see through that whole series them meet and fall in love, then have falling outs, and then, be married and to see the whole story pretty much. It's really gratifying. It's like a nice subplot to all the adventure.
Yeah, if Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3, their progression, their relationship there is an A+, then Uncharted 4 takes that and boosts it through the roof to an
Plus.
A+++, an S+.
Mm-hmm.
It's fantastic. They have simple couple time on the couch again, like we said with The Darkness. They're playing PlayStation together. They're commentating. They're commentating on Crash Bandicoot like people who have not played it properly would. It's fantastic. It's perfect. Unfortunately for Elena, Drake does have a mistress on the side that he just cannot say no to, and that is the life and adventure. And that causes problems as he tries to cover up the fact that he's, I've given up that life, but have I really? There's a scene where he gets caught, and boy, you just feel that, oh snap, oh you're in trouble, mister. I'm going to go wait outside. You two talk this out, because I feel like I'm imposing on this.
It does
right
such
now.
a good job. Naughty Dog do an incredible job of making you feel that the weight of those moments and make you go, oh man, you're in trouble. Oh, I feel like this is so private that I shouldn't be watching, even though you're controlling these characters for the most part. It's
I was the
strange.
one shooting 600 people in the face.
And yet you still feel like it's a private moment you shouldn't be intruding on. They are one of my favorite video game couples of all time. I love them. I love their dynamic. I love the witty banter. I got super jealous when they introduced a love rival midway through the series. I'm like, no, don't you dare. You get away. As much as I love Claudia Black's acting, back off.
It wouldn't be a sore point that somebody that you think, oh, yes, we should be together, and then they're like, no, we have no interest. So they're like, all right, well, forget it. I'll move on to someone else. And they're like, no, wait, actually. Might be a bit of history there. But yes, Nathan Drake and Chloe wrong person. See,
Ooh,
now,
how dare you. How dare
now
you.
I'm having problems shipping wrong characters together. Elena and Nathan Drake. Wonderful couple. Perfect. But before we wrap this up and talk about our future gaming goals, we've saved the big finish for last because let's try and keep this one a little more condensed, a little more concise than your Dragon Age talk there, lady friend. But
Lady friend.
all jokes aside, even myself, I find the relationships in the Mass Effect series probably the best example of interactive narratives that can progress over multiple games. You can have that history. Oh, I thought you were dead. So, now what do we do? Do we stay together? Do we start afresh? Do we not try again? I don't know. These sort of things happen in this series, and it is fantastic.
It's interesting too, because if you go back to the beginning, like I have recently, you are very limited in your choices. They have one human, male or female, depending on your gender, and then Liara to choose from for either gender. And Liara's species, the Asari, are considered
The
asexual.
series are like all basically females, but they can mind meld with any species and then have a baby through that. So
Yeah.
I don't know if they're just all females or if they're just not gendered. Or
Well, they
what
say
are.
that they're not gendered, but they look very much female. Thank you very much. They pretty much are. Everything, like physically,
Everything.
is pretty much female, like with these the tentacles at the top of their head.
Which
exception.
is more sexy than it sounds. Let's just...
Okay. But as you continue through the series, and I think what makes, again, these games great is that these relationships carry on through the series, or they can break up mid-series, and you can have conflict from said breakups as the games continue. And that's also really fascinating. So for my canon, my very first ever playthrough, my femshep romanced Caden, who... as we mentioned earlier, my very first ever video boyfriend was voiced by Raphael Sabaj.
So the same voice.
He's back again and as Caden, so immediately I'm like, yes, it's Caden. Hello, Caden. Hi, Caden. Talk to me, Caden. In my very first playthrough, I was very excited. And then, Mass Effect 2, he dumps me, so I am devastated. And that is where I discover Garrus. And it has been Garrus all the way ever since.
Garrus is actually in Mass Effect 1.
He is, but
Not
you...
a romanceable option.
No, not many characters are in the first game, but that's okay. And the reason I actually kind of prefer it that way. I see it as you've only just met Garrus and you build up this amazing friendship through these adventures, chasing down Seren, you know, all of that in the first game. You've become buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second one, and I don't consider this spoilers because it happens at the beginning of the second game, Shepard dies and then comes back after 2 years as rebuilt little meaty piece by meaty piece.
Oh. Well, that's attractive.
I know, right? It's a really gross but fascinating scene to watch. Garrus is one of the few that, like, comes and joins you again without reservation, is just happy to see you alive. And it's one of those, like, even if you don't romance Garrus, he is still, like, your bestie, I think, for everybody else. So that to me, I'm like, when it comes to relationships, whether real or in, you know, these fictitious worlds, I love seeing relationships built on friendships first because I feel like they're more solid.
Yep.
You know, they've got that foundation. They trust each other. They've seen each other at their best and worst. And that's true for Garrus and Shep. So when you have that option to delve deeper, it kind of starts off as just like flirting and let's blow off steam because we've got this big, you know, suicide mission. We don't know what's going to happen. And then in number 3 is when you see it truly blossom into like a real relationship. It wasn't just because we can. It's this is real. This is solid, and it's so satisfying. It's hard to explain without having like played it, but yeah. It's the reason why I have to almost replay that story every year because I love it so much.
Why don't you talk about our relationship with that much passion?
Excuse me, I do.
Now, myself, I started Mass Effect 1 years ago. My very first playthrough, romancing the only available human at the time, Ashley Williams, who was fine at the time, but in later games has the personality of a bar of soap.
Yes.
So every other time I've played that game, I have romanced Liara, a character that I quite like.
I do like Liara.
And she is available to join your team through various points of the other games.
And she's got some of the best DLC in number 2.
Yes, but that's it for her. She's not actually in the main game. So, like you said, sometimes you got dumped, mine wasn't available. Sometimes you got to move on. And so, who did I romance in Mass Effect 2?
Miranda.
What makes you say that?
Because I saw you playing. But also, Australian chick.
Had nothing to do with that. Had nothing to do with the skin-tight bodysuit that she wears. Yeah. Another character that I romanced wasn't very satisfied with. So I have a rough history of starting off bad relationships in the Mass Effect series. I've done many playthroughs. Primarily, I think my favourite romance option for a male Shepard is actually Jack. Character who's tough as nails, shaved head, tattoos galore. She's not a happy camper.
She's a very broken woman when you first meet her.
But there's that aspect of me that I just want to help people overcome their problems, and that's what I want to do with Jack.
She's a bit of a fixer-upper.
And with Jack, you get the interesting option that she just basically says, all right, how about we just do this? You know, you get the option to say, yep, cool, done. And then leave it at that. Done deal.
Yeah, if you want to completely destroy any chance of getting her loyalty, that's the way to go.
Well, I'm just saying it is an option, not an option I chose. But you can then show her that you actually care about the person, not just the action. And then you can have a great relationship that follows through into the next game. There are many different consequences in the Mass Effect series for doing things badly.
Yeah.
One of which can make Jack a opponent you have to eliminate in the third game. Many options. Very cool. Another one of my Mass Effect mishaps, which now that I'm listing them off, has happened a fair bit. I accidentally almost ended up in a same-sex relationship with Caden Lenko in the third game, and I didn't mean for it to happen. I was just trying to be friendly, and then hey, how about it? And
you just saw his buff board while he's in hospital, and you go, oof.
I was just trying to say nice things to a man and compliment him on his friendship, and then we almost became an item.
Well, that's one of the things that changed through the trilogy, because in the first Mass Effect game, you didn't have that option. Like, there was same sex as far as female playthrough, as if you considered Liara that, which she pretty much is. But men, you didn't have that option as far as for guys wanting that option or anyone wanting to do that for a male ship run through. You kind of had to almost be celibate until you get that option. I think it's not until the third game that they introduced that. So that's, I find interesting.
Now, one of my other Mass Effect relationship mishaps, I'm seeing a very significant pattern here. I finally found my one true romance in the Mass Effect series, and her name is Samantha Trainer. Now, she is a lovely woman, and I got to know her, and she was fantastic, and I invited her to the captain's quarters and said, hey, I'm interested in you. And she said, oh, this is awkward. I'm not interested in men. And I thought, oh my gosh.
You were devastated because she was like a British version of me, this asthmatic, all these allergies,
That's all I wanted
rambling
in a woman.
on.
The perfect, I finally found her after all of my Mass Effect mistakes. I found the one for me, and it's not an option. So then it didn't continue to be any better for me in Mass Effect Andromeda either, because those options were sort of not what I was after either. So I have not had much success in the Mass Effect world.
Oh, poor Brendo. At Mass Effect Andromeda, I romanced Jarl, my Sarah rider. Playing as Scott, though, is interesting because back in the early days, before they had all the bug fit, like the patches, you could romance, I think it was PB, the Asari, and Cora, the human biotic, simultaneously, and it wouldn't register that you were romancing both.
Like conflicting relationships.
Yeah, it wouldn't. They wouldn't have that confrontation that's usually scripted in these games of, hey, you got to choose me or choose them. Like, pick someone. It let you complete both of them to fruition in the same playthrough without realizing. So they've fixed that since. But you could, at the time, do both.
Yeah. To clarify, I did romance PB in Mass Effect Andromeda, another character that you can have a no-strings-attached fling with, but doing so would ruin any long-term relationship.
Yeah.
So I told her to wait, settle down,
As
cool your jets.
as fun as what she proposes sounds of zero gravity. I'm like, that sounds difficult, but also intriguing.
Okay.
She's a fun, quirky character, but yeah, it is fun to see her mature. You know, it's rare in these games to have a young Asari. Like, they often will introduce them when they're kind of more mid-age,
Which
where
for
they're a bit
them
more
is
level-headed.
400 years old.
Well, no, Liara's 100, so she's still considered youngish. But PB's even younger than that. So to see her be very almost childlike and very flippant in her attitude, it's kind of fun to see her mature and that relationship be a catalyst for that as well. Is one of those examples of good storytelling, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of examples. I actually really love Tali as a romance for male shepherd. I think she's a really great option.
I have romanced her in the past, but I also had to end up making choices that led to her committing suicide in a... yeah, my romantic history in the Mass Effect series, not the best.
You trigger all the tragedies. Okay, Shakespeare. So many things, so many wonderful love stories. I want to go play Mass Effect again now. I think there are a plethora of games you can choose to play come Valentine's Day if you want to live vicariously through the digital world, or if you're looking for something to play with a loved one as well. Yes. Always fun. But for us, those are some of our favourites. There are so many others that we didn't even get around to mentioning. Stories like in the most recent Spider-Man or in Fallout 4 even introduced the romance elements as a subplot. So many great games. And if we've missed stuff that you think should have been on this list, you can hit us up at thegaminglovers.com or send us a message on social media. Let us know.
And just quickly, there is a game, if I do a little bit of light research, just to refresh my memory if there's anything I have forgotten. I do a little quick Google search here and there to check out lists, usually, to see what's around. One game that features on a lot of lists that is a heartbreaking romance, and maybe you need that in your life right now. No, I don't.
Some people like that.
A game called To the Moon. It gets accolades galore. It sounds tragic. Not a game that I want to be experiencing right now based off my own emotional state, but who knows what I'll experience in the future. So that's another one that gets a lot of attention.
A lot of love. Lubbu Lubbu des.
Lubbu Lubbu des.
Time for gaming goals. Okay, 4 in Feb is on. What are you going to get done? Get her done this week.
Well, I'm so scared because I did start with the biggest game. I want it to be completed by the time our next podcast dropped. Between now and then is going to be the midpoint of February. So if I'm not even finished with my first game and I only have 2 weeks left...
Somebody's in trouble.
Yeah, I might be in trouble. Thankfully, on the horizon, I do have Oxenfree, which is a one-session sort of game that I can do in one day.
Mm-hmm.
So, I am hoping to have Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep finished, and I will not commit to having Oxenfree done as well, because that's too much. But I will have one of my 4 games complete by the 50% mark of February.
Nice.
That's my goal.
Smart.
And then Oxenfree will be next when I play it, and then I'm saving Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for my home stretch. What's it called? I'm just thinking of first base, second base after this episode. That's why I said home run.
Home stretch is more appropriate for that context.
Yeah, I was making like a romance joke, trying to get to first base.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whoosh over my head. Okay, my plan for gaming goals 4 in Feb specifically, I don't think I'm going to be anywhere near finishing God of War unless I do nothing but play that and, not sleep.
Having experienced that game, I can make 100% certainty that that's pretty much where you're at the moment.
I might be able to do another arc or 2 of Period Cube, but I think I'd like to motivate myself one day specifically this week to dedicate to Papers, Please, and just knock that out of the park. So I've got another one checked off.
The one day wonder.
Yes, I reckon I could do it. So long as I'm focused enough, I think I need to find time where I've got a good 4 or 5 hours where I can purely focus on that. And I'm in the mood to read paperwork.
Purely focus on bureaucracy. Wonderful. And that is a game that you will have to give 100% of your attention to.
Yeah, exactly.
If you want to play it properly.
Yes. So, and I'm okay with that, but it's just being able to find the time. Sometimes when I'm in that mood, it's like late at night and I only have like 2 hours. I'm like, that's not enough. So I keep putting it off. So I know, but I'm like, I feel like this is the kind of game though that I will do if I've got a big chunk of time. I'll learn from my mistakes when I inevitably fail the first round and start again, and I start memorizing the patterns and things to look out for. That I'll do better if I can do it all in one chunk rather than trying to play a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm going to keep forgetting how it works,
Well, we'll see how your strategy works out in the next week.
That we will. Thanks for joining us on episode 43 of the Gaming Lovers podcast.
And don't forget, you all have a special place in our heart, and I think that's the left ventricle. I'm not sure.
Until next time.
Lubbu Lubbu des.
Bye, Nara.
Thanks for listening to the Gaming Lovers podcast. For more episodes or to watch some live stream gaming, visit thegaminglovers.com.
Chowski.